Jake Miller sat quietly in the back of the classroom, his dark brown eyes fixed on the instructor at the front. The room buzzed with excitement as students whispered to each other about what Principal Dr. Elena Ruiz had just announced. Jake didn't join in their chatter. Instead, he kept his focus sharp, listening carefully to every word. Westridge Academy was no ordinary school. It wasn't located on Earth, where Jake came from, but rather on a distant planet called Zentrix Prime. The Wang Academy brought together young people from all over the galaxy, training them to become leaders, explorers, and warriors. Most of the students here were aliens, beings with strange abilities, advanced technology, or incredible physical strength. But Jake, he was human, and humans weren't exactly known for standing out in this crowd. On Earth, life could be tough. Humans lived among dangerous animals and harsh environments. Some planets considered Earth a death world because of how challenging it was to survive there. Because of this reputation, many of Jake's classmates looked down on him. They called him a Deathworlder, though not always kindly. To them, it meant he came from a primitive place, one that couldn't compare to their advanced civilizations. Jake didn't argue with them. He knew better than to waste his breath explaining that surviving on Earth required more than brute force. It took smarts, patience, and adaptability. Principal Ruiz cleared her throat, bringing the murmurs in the room to a halt. She was a tall woman with silver hair tied neatly into a bun, and her presence commanded respect. Today, however, she seemed unusually excited. Her voice carried a hint of mystery as she spoke. "Students," she began, pacing slowly across the stage. "You have been chosen for your exceptional talents and potential. You represent the brightest minds and strongest bodies in the galaxy, and now we are going to push you further." The students leaned forward in anticipation. Even Jake felt a flicker of curiosity. "For centuries," Ruiz continued, "we have trained our cadets using simulations and controlled environments. But today we introduce something new, something real." A hush fell over the room. Real? That was unexpected. Simulations were safe. They allowed mistakes without consequences. But real? That sounded dangerous. Ruiz gestured toward the large doors at the side of the auditorium. Two guards stepped forward, pulling open the heavy metal panels. Behind them stood a massive container, transparent enough to reveal what lay inside. Gasps rippled through the audience. Inside the container was a creature unlike anything most of the students had ever seen. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, its body covered in sleek black scales that shimmered faintly under the lights. Its claws were long and curved, glinting like polished steel. Its eyes glowed a deep red, scanning the crowd with an unsettling intensity. Every few seconds, the creature shifted its weight, muscles rippling beneath its skin. It moved with a predatory grace, exuding power and danger. "This," Ruiz said, her voice steady despite the awe and fear radiating from the students, "is a Vraxtal, a predator native to the planet Krylos. Known for its intelligence, speed, and ferocity, the Vraxtal has earned a fearsome reputation across the galaxy. Many hunters consider it the ultimate challenge." Jake tilted his head slightly, studying the creature with interest. There was something familiar about the way it moved, the way its gaze darted around the room. On Earth, he'd encountered plenty of predators, wolves, bears, even sharks during a summer trip to the coast. Each one had its own patterns, its own instincts. This Vraxtal reminded him of those creatures, only bigger and far more dangerous. "Purpose of this exercise," Ruiz continued, "is simple. Over the next week, you will face the Vraxtal in a series of combat trials. These trials will take place in a specially designed arena equipped with various terrains and obstacles. Your task is to survive against the Vraxtal while demonstrating your tactical skills and resourcefulness." She paused, letting her words sink in. Some students looked eager, already imagining themselves victorious. Others appeared nervous, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Jake remained still, his expression unreadable. "One important note," Ruiz added. "While the trials are designed to test your limits, safety measures will be in place. Instructors will intervene if necessary to prevent serious injury. However, do not mistake this for a game. The Vraxtal is a living, thinking being. Treat it with caution and respect. As Ruiz finished speaking, the room erupted into whispers again. Students debated strategies, speculated about the creature's weaknesses, and boasted about their chances of success. Samantha Brooks, a confident Zorathian girl sitting near the front, turned to her neighbor and said loudly, "This should be easy. I'll take it down in minutes." Jake didn't respond to the chatter. He kept his attention on the Vraxtal, watching as it tested the walls of its container. Its movements were fluid, calculated. It reminded him of the mountain lions he'd seen stalking deer back home. Predators didn't attack blindly. They planned, waited for the right moment. If these students thought they could overpower the Vraxtal with sheer force, they were in for a rude awakening. When the assembly ended, the students filed out of the auditorium, buzzing with excitement. Jake lingered behind, observing the creature one last time before leaving. He noticed how the Vraxtal's tail twitched when someone got too close to its container, how its ears flattened slightly whenever loud voices echoed through the room. These small details told him a lot. The Vraxtal wasn't just strong, it was smart. Very smart. Back in his dorm room later that evening, Jake unpacked a small notebook from his bag. Inside, he jotted down notes about the Vraxtal's behavior, sketching quick diagrams of its posture and movements. He wrote reminders about the importance of staying calm, of reading the situation before acting. These were lessons he'd learned growing up on Earth, lessons that had kept him alive more times than he cared to count. As he worked, Jake thought about his classmates. They were talented, sure, but many of them relied too heavily on their gadgets, their size, or their species' natural advantages. They didn't understand that sometimes the best weapon wasn't strength or speed, it was knowledge. Knowledge of your enemy, of the environment, of yourself. By the time Jake closed his notebook, night had fallen outside his window. The stars twinkled faintly in the distance, reminding him of why he'd come to Westridge Academy in the first place. He wanted to prove that humans weren't weak or insignificant. They were survivors, capable of thriving in places others wouldn't dare go. Tomorrow, in the arena, he would show everyone exactly what that meant. And maybe, just maybe, he'd teach the Vraxtal a thing or two along the way. Jake Miller sat quietly in the back of the classroom, his dark brown eyes fixed on the instructor at the front. The room buzzed with excitement as students whispered to each other about what Principal Dr. Elena Ruiz had just announced. Jake didn't join in their chatter. Instead, he kept his focus sharp, listening carefully to every word. Westridge Academy was no ordinary school. It wasn't located on Earth, where Jake came from, but rather on a distant planet called Zentrix Prime. The Academy brought together young people from all over the galaxy, training them to become leaders, explorers, and warriors. Most of the students here were aliens, beings with strange abilities, advanced technology, or incredible physical strength. But Jake? He was human, and humans weren't exactly known for standing out in this crowd. On Earth, life could be tough. Humans lived among dangerous animals and harsh environments. Some planets considered Earth a death world because of how challenging it was to survive there. Because of this reputation, many of Jake's classmates looked down on him. They called him a Deathworlder, though not always kindly. To them, it meant he came from a primitive place, one that couldn't compare to their advanced civilizations. Jake didn't argue with them. He knew better than to waste his breath explaining that surviving on Earth required more than brute force. It took smarts, patience, and adaptability. Principal Ruiz cleared her throat, bringing the murmurs in the room to a halt. She was a tall woman with silver hair tied neatly into a bun, and her presence commanded respect. Today, however, she seemed unusually excited. Her voice carried a hint of mystery as she spoke. "Students," she began, pacing slowly across the stage, "you have been chosen for your exceptional talents and potential. You represent the brightest minds and strongest bodies in the galaxy, and now we are going to push you further." The students leaned forward in anticipation. Even Jake felt a flicker of curiosity. For centuries, Ruiz continued, we have trained our cadets using simulations and controlled environments, but today we introduce something new, something real. A hush fell over the room. Real? That was unexpected. Simulations were safe. They allowed mistakes without consequences. But real? That sounded dangerous. Ruiz gestured toward the large doors at the side of the auditorium. 2 guards stepped forward, pulling open the heavy metal panels. Behind them stood a massive container, transparent enough to reveal what lay inside. Gasps rippled through the audience. Inside the container was a creature unlike anything most of the students had ever seen. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, its body covered in sleek black scales that shimmered faintly under the lights. Its claws were long and curved, glinting like polished steel. Its eyes glowed a deep red, scanning the crowd with an unsettling intensity. Every few seconds, the creature shifted its weight, muscles rippling beneath its skin. It moved with a predatory grace, exuding power and danger. This, Ruiz said, her voice steady despite the awe and fear radiating from the students, is a Vraxtal, a predator native to the planet Krylos. Known for its intelligence, speed, and ferocity, the Vraxtal has earned a fearsome reputation across the galaxy. Many hunters consider it the ultimate challenge. Jake tilted his head slightly, studying the creature with interest. There was something familiar about the way it moved, the way its gaze darted around the room. On Earth, he'd encountered plenty of predators. Wolves, bears, even sharks during a summer trip to the coast. Each one had its own patterns, its own instincts. This Vraxtal reminded him of those creatures, only bigger and far more dangerous. The purpose of this exercise, Ruiz continued, is simple. Over the next week, you will face the Vraxtal in a series of combat trials. These trials will take place in a specially designed arena equipped with various terrains and obstacles. Your task is to survive against the Vraxtal while demonstrating your tactical skills and resourcefulness. She paused, letting her words sink in. Some students looked eager, already imagining themselves victorious. Others appeared nervous, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Jake remained still, his expression unreadable. One important note, Ruiz added. While the trials are designed to test your limits, safety measures will be in place. Instructors will intervene if necessary to prevent serious injury. However, do not mistake this for a game. The Vraxtal is a living, thinking being. Treat it with caution and respect. As Ruiz finished speaking, the room erupted into whispers again. Students debated strategies, speculated about the creature's weaknesses, and boasted about their chances of success. Samantha Brooks, a confident, Sarathian girl sitting near the front, turned to her neighbor and said loudly, "This should be easy. I'll take it down in minutes." Jake didn't respond to the chatter. He kept his attention on the Vraxtal, watching as it tested the walls of its container. Its movements were fluid, calculated. It reminded him of the mountain lions he'd seen stalking deer back home. Predators didn't attack blindly. They planned, waited for the right moment. If these students thought they could overpower the Vraxtal with sheer force, they were in for a rude awakening. When the assembly ended, the students filed out of the auditorium, buzzing with excitement. Jake lingered behind, observing the creature one last time before leaving. He noticed how the Vraxtal's tail twitched when someone got too close to its container, how its ears flattened slightly whenever loud voices echoed through the room. These small details told him a lot. The Vraxtal wasn't just strong, it was smart. Very smart. Back in his dorm room later that evening, Jake unpacked a small notebook from his bag. Inside, he jotted down notes about the Vraxtal's behavior, sketching quick diagrams of its posture and movements. He wrote reminders about the importance of staying calm, of reading the situation before acting. These were lessons he'd learned growing up on Earth, lessons that had kept him alive more times than he cared to count. As he worked, Jake thought about his classmates. They were talented, sure, but many of them relied too heavily on their gadgets, their size, or their species' natural advantages. They didn't understand that sometimes the best weapon wasn't strength or speed. It was knowledge. Knowledge of your enemy, of the environment, of yourself. By the time Jake closed his notebook, night had fallen outside his window. The stars twinkled faintly in the distance, reminding him of why he'd come to Westridge Academy in the first place. He wanted to prove that humans weren't weak or insignificant. They were survivors, capable of thriving in places others wouldn't dare go. Tomorrow, in the arena, he would show everyone exactly what that meant, and maybe, just maybe, he'd teach the Vraxtal a thing or two along the way. The moment Jake stepped back into the observation deck, the room exploded with questions. Students surrounded him, their voices overlapping as they demanded to know how he had survived. Some were curious, others skeptical, and a few even seemed jealous. But Jake didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, calm and composed, letting the chaos wash over him. Samantha Brooks pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by a mix of frustration and awe. "What was that?" she asked, her voice sharp but tinged with disbelief. "You just gave up? Is that your big plan?" Jake shook his head, his expression steady. "I didn't give up," he said quietly. "I adapted." "Adapted?" Samantha repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You knelt down like you were surrendering. How is that adapting?" Jake met her gaze, his tone calm but firm. "It's not about fighting harder or faster. It's about understanding what the predator wants and giving it something else instead. The Vraxtal wasn't looking for a fight. It was testing me, trying to figure out if I was a threat. When I stopped moving, when I lowered myself, I showed it I wasn't dangerous. That changed the situation." Samantha frowned, clearly struggling to process his explanation. Ethan Cole, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. His green skin flushed slightly as he spoke. "He's right," Ethan said, glancing at Jake. "The Vraxtal isn't mindless, it thinks, it observes. If you act like prey, it might attack. But if you show it, you're not worth the effort." "You confuse it," Jake finished, nodding. "And confusion buys time. Time to think, to plan, to survive." The room fell silent as the students absorbed his words. For many of them, this was a completely new way of thinking. They had grown up in worlds where strength and technology ruled, where dominance was everything. The idea of surviving by being still by showing weakness felt foreign, almost wrong. Commander Dax Torrin appeared at the edge of the crowd, his stern face unreadable. "Miller," he barked, motioning for Jake to follow him. Without a word, Jake slipped through the group and joined the instructor. As they walked away, whispers erupted behind them, each student speculating about what Jake had done and why the commander wanted to speak with him. In a quiet corner of the academy, far from the noise of the observation deck, Commander Torrin turned to Jake. His dark eyes studied the young human carefully, searching for something. "Explain yourself," he said bluntly. "What made you think kneeling would work?" Jake hesitated for a moment before answering. He knew the commander wouldn't accept vague answers or excuses. "Back on Earth," he began, "we have predators, too. Big ones like bears and wolves. When they see something smaller than them, they don't always attack. Sometimes they watch, waiting to see if it's worth the risk. If the smaller thing runs, it triggers their instinct to chase. But if it stays calm, doesn't threaten them, they lose interest." Torrin's brow furrowed. "You're saying you treated the Vraxtal like an Earth animal?" "Not exactly," Jake replied. "But the principle is the same. Predators rely on patterns. They expect certain behaviors. If you break those patterns, you can change the outcome." The commander stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Interesting," he muttered. "Very interesting." He turned and began walking again, leaving Jake to follow. "You've given us something to think about, Miller. Something most of these kids haven't considered." Jake didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to say. He hadn't expected praise or even attention for his actions. All he'd wanted was to survive. Later that evening, the buzz around Jake's performance continued. Students gathered in common areas, replaying footage of the trial and dissecting every move he had made. Some admired his bravery, while others dismissed it as luck. But one person approached Jake with genuine curiosity. Ethan Cole. Ethan found Jake sitting alone in the library, sketching diagrams in his notebook. "Hey," Ethan said softly, pulling up a chair. "Can we talk?" Jake glanced up, surprised. "Sure," he said, closing the notebook. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about what you did," Ethan admitted, "about how you handled the Vraxtal. It makes sense now, but I never would have thought of it myself. Most of us wouldn't." Jake shrugged. "It's just how I grew up. On Earth, you learn pretty quickly that running isn't always the best option. Sometimes staying still keeps you alive." Ethan nodded, leaning forward. "That's amazing. Honestly, it's brilliant. I've spent hours studying predators, reading reports, analyzing data, but none of it prepared me for what happened today. You didn't use weapons or tech. You used insight." Jake smiled faintly. "Insight doesn't come from books. It comes from experience. From watching, listening, learning." Ethan looked thoughtful. "Do you think you could teach me? Or maybe help me understand more? I mean, I know I'm not human and my instincts are different, but I want to get better, smarter." For the first time since arriving at Westridge Academy, Jake felt a spark of connection. Here was someone who genuinely wanted to learn, who saw value in his perspective. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "I can try." Over the next few days, Jake and Ethan began working together. They spent hours in the library, comparing notes and discussing strategies. Ethan shared his research on alien ecosystems while Jake talked about Earth's wildlife and the lessons he'd learned from it. Slowly, they developed a mutual respect, each recognizing the other's strengths. Meanwhile, Samantha Brooks kept her distance. At first, she avoided Jake entirely, embarrassed by her earlier defeat and unwilling to admit she might have been wrong. But eventually, curiosity got the better consciousness, if only barely. One afternoon, she found Jake practicing balance exercises in the training room. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. Jake glanced up, unfazed. "Practicing," he said simply. "Practicing what?" she pressed. "You already beat the Vraxtal. What else do you need to prepare for?" Jake straightened, brushing sweat from his forehead. "Survival isn't about beating one thing," he explained. "It's about being ready for anything. Balance, focus, awareness, they matter just as much as strength or speed." Samantha frowned, crossing her arms. "So you're saying I should stop relying on my blades?" "I'm saying you should think beyond them," Jake corrected. "Your skills are great, but they're not enough on their own. What happens if your blades break? Or if your enemy is faster, you need options." To his surprise, Samantha didn't argue. Instead, she watched him silently for a moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "Fine," she said, reluctantly. "Maybe you're onto something. Can you show me?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Okay," he said, "but it's not going to be easy." "It never is," Samantha replied, a hint of determination creeping into her voice. As the days passed, Jake became a kind of mentor to his classmates. While some still doubted his methods, others embraced them, eager to improve. Together, they formed small groups practicing techniques inspired by Earth's predators. They learned to read body language, to anticipate movements, to adapt to changing situations. Principal Ruiz noticed the shift. During a staff meeting, she remarked on the growing camaraderie among the students. "Something's changed," she said to Commander Torin. "They're working together more, supporting each other." Torin nodded, his usual scowl softening slightly. "Miller's influence," he said. "He's teaching them to think differently." Ruiz smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe there's hope for humanity yet." By the end of the week, the atmosphere at Westridge Academy had transformed. Gone was the arrogance and dismissiveness that had once defined the students' attitudes toward Jake. In its place was a newfound respect, not just for him, but for the lessons he represented. Survival wasn't about proving superiority. It was about understanding, adapting, and enduring. And though Jake remained humble, he couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt. For the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Not because he was stronger or smarter than anyone else, but because he had found a way to turn his differences into strengths. Even as the trials continued, Jake knew one thing for certain. The real battle wasn't against the Vraxtal. It was against the limits people placed on themselves and the courage it took to break free of them. The weeks following Jake's encounter with the Vraxtal brought a noticeable change to Westridge Academy. The students, once divided by their species and abilities, began working together more closely. They shared strategies, practiced new techniques, and even started forming friendships across cultural lines. For many of them, Jake's approach to survival had opened their eyes to possibilities they hadn't considered before. Jake himself became something of a quiet leader. He didn't seek attention or demand respect. Instead, he earned it through his actions. When students asked for advice, he gave it freely, explaining concepts in simple terms that anyone could understand. Survival isn't about being the strongest, he often said. It's about being smart, about knowing when to fight, when to run, and when to do nothing at all. Samantha Brooks was one of the first to embrace this mindset fully. After her initial skepticism, she threw herself into learning from Jake, determined to improve. She still loved her plasma blades, but now she used them sparingly, focusing on timing and precision rather than brute force. Her confidence returned, not because she believed she was invincible, but because she understood her limits better. Ethan Cole continued to study tirelessly, combining Jake's insights with his own research. Together, they created detailed plans for future trials, mapping out every possible scenario. Ethan's analytical mind complemented Jake's practical experience, and their partnership grew stronger with each passing day. Even some of the quieter students, who had previously kept to themselves, began stepping forward. A shy girl named Lily Chen, part of a race known as the Larithians, surprised everyone by volunteering to test a new strategy during practice sessions. Her species was small and physically weak compared to others, but Lily proved that intelligence and teamwork could overcome size and strength. Inspired by Jake's example, she learned to use the environment to her advantage, setting traps and creating diversions that baffled both classmates and instructors alike. Commander Dax Torin observed these changes with a mix of pride and caution. While he appreciated the newfound unity among the students, he worried they might grow complacent. "Don't forget," he reminded them during one training session, "the Vraxtal is only the beginning. Out there," he gestured toward the stars visible through the Academy's massive windows, "there are challenges far greater than any predator." But despite Torin's warnings, the students felt a renewed sense of purpose. They no longer saw themselves as individuals competing for glory. They were a team, united by shared goals and mutual respect. One evening, Principal Ruiz called Jake to her office. The room was spacious and well lit, filled with holographic displays showing maps of distant planets and reports on interstellar relations. Ruiz sat behind her desk, her silver hair catching the light as she looked up at Jake. "Take a seat," she said, gesturing to a chair. Jake obeyed, curious about why she had summoned him. "I've been watching you closely, Mr. Miller," Ruiz began, folding her hands on the desk. "You've accomplished something remarkable here, something I wasn't sure was possible." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what made sense," he replied. "Nothing special." Ruiz chuckled softly. "That's exactly why it's special. You didn't rely on flashy gadgets or superior strength. You used your instincts, your knowledge, and your humanity. And in doing so, you've inspired others to do the same." She paused, studying him carefully. "Tell me, Jake, why did you come to Westridge Academy? What do you hope to achieve?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "I came here because I wanted to prove something, to myself and to everyone else. Humans aren't weak. We're survivors. We adapt, we learn, we endure. I wanted to show that we can hold our own even among beings like this." He gestured vaguely toward the window, where ships from countless alien races docked regularly. Ruiz nodded approvingly. And have you achieved that goal? Jake hesitated. I think so, he said slowly. At least I've started to. Good, Ruiz said, leaning back in her chair. Because there's more ahead for you, if you're willing to take it. What do you mean? Jake asked, his curiosity piqued. I'm considering recommending you for advanced placement. In leadership courses, Ruiz explained. Your ability to inspire and guide others is rare, especially in someone so young. With proper training, you could become a bridge between humans and other species, a voice for cooperation and understanding. Jake blinked, taken aback. Leadership courses, advanced placement, these weren't things he'd ever imagined for himself. Back on Earth, he'd always been an outsider, someone who preferred solitude to crowds. The idea of leading others felt overwhelming and yet oddly appealing. I'll think about it, he said finally. Thank you for considering me. Ruiz smiled warmly. You've earned it, Jake. Don't sell yourself short. As word spread about Ruiz's potential recommendation, Jake found himself facing a new kind of challenge. Expectations. His classmates looked to him not just as a peer, but as a role model. Some sought his guidance constantly, asking for advice on everything from combat tactics to personal struggles. Others simply watched him, waiting to see what he would do next. At first, Jake struggled to adjust. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the pressure sometimes felt suffocating. But over time, he realized that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening, supporting, and helping others find their own paths. Slowly, he embraced his role, finding joy in seeing his classmates grow and succeed. The final trial against the Vraxtel approached, and the students prepared with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This time, however, they weren't focused solely on individual performance. Instead, they worked as a unit, sharing tips and encouraging one another. Even those who weren't participating directly gathered in the observation deck, cheering loudly for their peers. When Jake's turn came again, the crowd fell silent. Many wondered if he would repeat his earlier strategy, kneeling before the predator to avoid conflict. But Jake had other ideas. Entering the arena, he moved deliberately, keeping his movement slow and steady. The Vraxtal watched him intently, its glowing eyes tracking his every step. Unlike last time, Jake carried a small tool, a length of rope he had woven himself. It wasn't a weapon but a tool for communication. As he circled the creature, he flicked the rope gently, creating soft sounds that echoed off the walls. To everyone's amazement, the Vraxtal responded. It tilted its head, mimicking Jake's movements almost playfully. The two danced around each other, neither attacking nor retreating. It was as if they were speaking a language no one else understood, a language of gestures, rhythms, and trust. Finally, Jake stopped moving altogether. He crouched low, extending the rope toward the Vraxtal like an offering. The creature sniffed it cautiously, then nudged it with its snout. For a brief moment, human and predator stood side by side, equals in the arena. The simulation ended, quietly, without fanfare or violence. As Jake left the field, the entire observation deck erupted into applause, not because he had won, but because he had shown them something profound, that understanding and respect could transcend even the fiercest differences. In the days that followed, Jake reflected on his journey. From mockery to admiration, he had come a long way since arriving at Westridge Academy. But more importantly, he had helped others see the value in looking beyond appearances, in embracing diversity, and in finding strength in unity. For Jake, this was just the beginning. Somewhere deep down, he knew his story wouldn't end here. There were still worlds to explore, challenges to face, and lessons to share. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready. Because surviving wasn't just about enduring, it was about thriving, together. The final trial against the Vraxtal marked a turning point for everyone at Westridge Academy. It wasn't just an event. It was a lesson, one that resonated far beyond the arena. Jake's interaction with the Predator had shown his classmates something they hadn't fully understood before. Strength didn't always mean domination. Sometimes it meant connection. In the days after the trial, Jake noticed subtle changes in how people treated him. Before, he'd been dismissed as just another human, someone who couldn't possibly measure up to the advanced aliens around him. Now he was respected, not because he had proven himself physically superior, but because he had demonstrated qualities harder to achieve: patience, insight, and empathy. Students from different species approached him with questions or shared stories about their own worlds. They wanted to learn not only from his experiences on Earth, but also from the way he thought. Samantha Brooks became one of Jake's closest allies. She still carried herself with confidence, but it was tempered now by humility. After her initial failure in the arena, she had worked tirelessly to refine her skills, blending her natural speed with Jake's strategies. During practice sessions, she often partnered with him, testing new techniques and pushing each other to improve. Though she rarely admitted it aloud, Jake could tell she admired him. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. Ethan Cole continued to thrive under Jake's mentorship. Together they expanded their research, studying not just predators like the Vraxtal, but also ecosystems across the galaxy. Ethan's maps grew more detailed, incorporating insights from Jake's observations. He even began developing tools inspired by Earth's wildlife, devices designed to mimic animal behaviors rather than overpower them. One evening, as they pored over holographic projections in the library, Ethan looked up and said, "You've changed everything for me, Jake. I used to think survival was all about planning. Now I realize it's about adapting to the moment, to the environment, to life itself." Jake smiled faintly. "It's not just about surviving," he replied. "It's about thriving, about finding ways to make things better, for yourself and for others." News of Jake's success spread beyond Westridge Academy. Reports of the trials reached interstellar networks, sparking debates across the galaxy. For centuries, humans had been seen as outsiders, a species struggling to keep pace with more advanced civilizations. But Jake's performance challenged that perception. Articles appeared on galactic news feeds praising his ingenuity and adaptability. Some commentators argued that humanity's reputation as Deathworlders might actually be an advantage, proof that living in harsh conditions fostered resilience and creativity. Principal Ruiz monitored these developments closely. She knew the attention could benefit both Jake and the Academy, but she also worried about the pressure it might bring. One afternoon, she pulled Jake aside after class. "How are you handling all this?" she asked, gesturing toward a nearby screen displaying headlines about him. Jake shrugged. "It's strange," he admitted. "I never expected any of this. Back on Earth, I was just me. No one paid much attention. Here, it feels like everyone's watching." Ruiz nodded sympathetically. "Fame can be overwhelming," she said. "But remember why you're here. Not for recognition, but to show what humans are capable of. Don't let the noise distract you." "I won't," Jake promised, and he meant it. Despite the growing spotlight, he remained focused on what mattered most: learning, growing, and helping those around him do the same. As the semester progressed, Jake's influence extended beyond combat training. His lessons about adaptation and understanding began shaping other aspects of academy life. In science classes, students started applying Earth-based principles to solve engineering problems. In diplomacy workshops, they explored ways to bridge cultural divides using patience and mutual respect. Even Commander Torrens softened slightly, acknowledging that Jake's methods complemented traditional military tactics rather than undermining them. One day, during a group project on interspecies communication, Lily Chen approached Jake with an idea. "What if we created a program to teach others about Earth?" she suggested. "Not just animals or environments, but how humans think, how we survive. Maybe it could help break down stereotypes." Jake liked the idea immediately. With Lily's help, he organized a series of presentations called Earth Insights. Each session focused on a different aspect of human life, from hunting and farming to storytelling and community building. The events drew large crowds, not just from Westridge Academy but from neighboring institutions as well. Aliens who had once dismissed humans as primitive were amazed by the complexity and resourcefulness of Earth's cultures. Through these presentations, Jake discovered something unexpected. Teaching others deepened his own understanding. Explaining concepts forced him to reflect on his experiences, to see them in new ways. He realized that while he had come to Westridge to prove humanity's worth, he was also learning about his own identity and about the shared humanity that connected him to every person back on Earth. Despite his growing responsibilities, Jake made time for personal reflection. Late at night, when the academy halls were quiet, he would sit by the window and watch the stars. He thought about home, the forests, rivers, and mountains he had explored as a child. He remembered the predators he had encountered, the lessons they had taught him. Those memories grounded him, reminding him where he came from and why he had chosen this path. He also thought about the future. Principal Ruiz's offer of advanced placement still lingered in his mind. Leadership courses would open doors, giving him opportunities to shape policies and forge alliances across the galaxy. But leadership came with challenges too. Expectations, scrutiny, and the weight of making decisions that affected countless lives. Was he ready for that? One evening, Samantha joined him by the window. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. Leaning against the frame, Jake chuckled softly. "Just thinking about what comes next," he said. "You'll figure it out," Samantha replied confidently. "You always do." Her faith in him was reassuring, but Jake knew the choice was his, alone to make. For now, he decided to focus on the present, to enjoy the friendships he had built, the knowledge he had gained, and the impact he had made. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it step by step. By the end of the semester, Jake's legacy at Westridge Academy was undeniable. He had transformed not only himself but also those around him. His classmates carried his lessons into their daily lives, applying them to challenges big and small. Even instructors found themselves rethinking long-held assumptions about human potential. On the last day of classes, Principal Ruiz addressed the entire academy during a farewell assembly. "This year has been remarkable," she said, her voice warm with pride. "We've seen incredible growth, not just in skill but in perspective. You've learned to work together, to embrace diversity, and to see value in differences. And none of this would have been possible without Jake Miller." The room erupted into applause as Jake stood awkwardly, unsure how to respond. When the noise finally subsided, Ruiz added, "Remember this moment. Remember what you've achieved. Because the galaxy needs leaders like you, leaders who understand that true strength lies not in domination, but in connection." As the assembly ended, Jake felt a surge of gratitude for his teachers, his friends, and the journey that had brought him here. He knew he wasn't perfect, and there was still so much to learn. But for the first time, he felt confident in who he was and what he could contribute. Outside, the stars shone brightly, stretching endlessly across the sky. Somewhere among them, Jake knew, were worlds waiting to be explored, challenges waiting to be faced. And wherever he went, he would carry the lessons of Earth and of Westridge Academy with him. Because surviving wasn't just about enduring, it was about thriving. Together. The final days of the semester at Westridge Academy passed quickly, filled with celebrations, farewells, and promises to stay in touch. For Jake Miller, it was a time of reflection. He thought about how much he had changed since arriving on Zentrix Prime and how much he had helped others change too. What started as a journey to prove humanity's worth had become something far greater, a chance to inspire unity and understanding across species. As students packed their belongings and prepared for winter break, Jake found himself surrounded by classmates who wanted to share one last conversation before parting ways. Samantha Brooks stopped by his dorm room to thank him again for everything he had taught her. "You've made me a better fighter and a better person," she said sincerely. "I won't forget that." Ethan Cole came next, carrying a small, device he had been working on. "It's not finished yet," Ethan explained, handing it over. "But I call it the Earthlink. It's designed to mimic animal sounds and movements like the ones you described from Earth. I hope it'll help future students understand your world better." Jake accepted the gift with a smile. "It's amazing," he said. "Thank you." Even Lily Chen dropped by, shyly presenting him with a handmade bracelet woven from fibers native to her home planet. "To remind you of us," she said softly, "no matter where you go." These small gestures touched Jake deeply. They reminded him that while his journey at Westridge Academy was ending, the connections he had formed would last forever. Principal Ruiz hosted a private farewell dinner for Jake and a few select students. The meal was simple but meaningful, held in a quiet corner of the Academy's dining hall. As they ate, Ruiz raised a glass to toast Jake's achievements. "You've done more than survive here," she said. "You've thrived, and in doing so, you've shown us all what it means to be truly strong." Jake felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to being praised so openly, but he appreciated the sentiment behind it. "I couldn't have done any of this alone," he replied. "Everyone here has taught me something. I'm grateful for that." After dinner, Ruiz handed Jake a sealed envelope. Inside was an official letter confirming his acceptance into advanced leadership courses. "This is just the beginning," she told him. "Wherever you decide to go next, know that Westridge will always support you." Jake tucked the letter safely into his bag, feeling both excited and nervous about the future. Leadership roles weren't easy, but he knew he was ready to try, if only because he believed in the values he had shared with his classmates. When the day of departure finally arrived, Jake stood at the Academy's main entrance watching as ships from different planets lined up to take students home. Some of his friends lingered nearby, reluctant to say goodbye. "Will we see you again?" Ethan asked, his green skin glowing faintly under the artificial lights. "Of course," Jake promised. "We're part of the same galaxy now. Our paths will cross again." Samantha hugged him tightly, surprising even herself. "Take care of yourself out there," she said. "And don't let anyone tell you humans can't keep up." Lily waved shyly, holding back tears. "Write to us," she urged. "Tell us what you're doing." Jake nodded, promising to stay in touch. Then, with a final wave, he boarded the transport ship bound for Earth. As the vessel lifted off, he gazed out the window, watching Westridge Academy grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Back on Earth, Jake returned to the familiar landscapes he had grown up with. The forests were still dense, the rivers still rushing, and the mountains still towering. But everything felt different now. His experiences at Westridge Academy had given him a new perspective, not just on survival, but on life itself. He spent his first few weeks reconnecting with family and friends, sharing stories about his adventures. At first, they struggled to believe some of the things he described: aliens, interstellar travel, combat trials with deadly predators. But Jake didn't mind. He knew his journey sounded unbelievable because it was extraordinary. One afternoon, while hiking through the woods near his childhood home, Jake encountered a bear. It stood on its hind legs, sniffing the air cautiously. Instead of panicking, Jake froze, remembering the lessons he had learned from the Vraxtal. Slowly, deliberately, he backed away, giving the bear space to retreat. When it finally lumbered off into the trees, Jake smiled to himself. These instincts were second nature to him now, honed not just by Earth's challenges but by his time among the stars. Word of Jake's success reached his hometown, sparking pride and curiosity. Local news outlets interviewed him, eager to hear about his experiences. Teachers invited him to speak at schools, hoping to inspire younger generations. Jake embraced these opportunities, using them to highlight humanity's strengths: adaptability, resilience, and creativity. During one presentation, a young boy raised his hand and asked, "Do you think humans will ever be as important as aliens?" Jake knelt down to meet the boy's gaze. "Humans are already important," he said. "We may not have fancy technology or superpowers, but we have something just as valuable: heart. We care about each other, and we work together to overcome anything. That's what makes us special." The boy grinned, clearly satisfied with the answer. Jake stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. If he could inspire even one child to dream bigger, to believe in themselves, then his journey had been worth it. Months later, Jake received a message from Principal Ruiz. Tronic was an invitation to join a newly formed interstellar council dedicated to promoting cooperation between species. Your voice matters, Ruiz wrote. Help shape the future of our galaxy. Jake stared at the screen for a long time, considering the offer. It was a big step, one that would take him far from Earth once again. But he knew it was the right choice. He had seen firsthand how understanding and collaboration could bridge even the widest gaps. Now he wanted to ensure that those lessons reached as many people as possible. With a deep breath, Jake typed his response. I'm honored to accept. Thank you for believing in me. As Jake prepared to leave Earth once more, he packed lightly, bringing only what he needed. Among his belongings was the bracelet Lily had given him, the unfinished Earthlink device from Ethan, and the official letter confirming his place in leadership courses. Each item represented a piece of his journey, a reminder of where he had been and where he was going. On the morning of his departure, Jake stood on the same hill where he had watched ships descend years ago. This time, however, he wasn't looking up at the stars. He was stepping toward them. The transport ship awaited him, gleaming in the sunlight, ready to carry him to his next adventure. As he climbed aboard, Jake glanced back at Earth one last time. Its blue-green surface shimmered peacefully below, a testament to the resilience of its inhabitants. Somewhere inside him, he carried that same spirit, the strength to adapt, the courage to connect, and the determination to thrive no matter the odds. The engines roared to life, lifting the ship into the sky. Jake closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engines soothe him. He didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but he was ready to face it. Because surviving wasn't just about enduring, it was about thriving. Together, and Jake Miller, the human, Deathworlder, was ready to show the universe what that truly meant.